ladies, my prospective ladies. Welcome back to another episode of Perspectives with Sherry. I am your host, Sherry Ryan. And if you are new to the channel, welcome. Over here, this is a safe space for women in midlife. We talk about all things health, mental health, physical health, wealth, and always trying to walk in empowerment. I always say that women over 40, we have to be really intentional because statistically, there is more life behind us that's in front of us. And so everything that we try to do over here is intentional. And I am in the midst of this grief series. And I am so excited and honored to have with me Mrs. Karol Holmes. And I'm going to tell you, ladies, a little bit about her. So, first of all, thank you, Karol, for being on the show, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. So, ladies, let me just tell you how amazing this woman is, okay? Karol Holmes is the mother of 7 children, 5 on earth and 2 in heaven. Karol and her husband, Jim, live in the Midwest, and they own a residential they own and operate a residential construction business in which they build quality custom homes. They have 7 beautiful grandchildren. I'm so jealous. With another one on the way, y'all. And Karol earned a degree in clinical laboratory science and worked many years in healthcare, which has served her well in answering God's call to adopt and care for 3 children with complex medical needs and disabilities. Karol is the author of 2 books, Grace According to Gifts, and Only Jesus Knows, Loving the World's Most Vulnerable. Karol's second book has earned the Christ Lit Book Award for Christian Literature. She is passionate about her family, her faith, health, and fitness. She's very passionate about her health and fitness and advocating for families of children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And you can visit Karol at lovingtheleast.com. So now, if you look at my banner, we are welcoming her, and I have both of her books listed. You need to get those, and where you can connect with her on lovingtheleast.com. So, welcome, Karol. We are so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. So, y'all, I have so much to talk to her about. As you know, this is part 3 of our grief series. And Karol has, she has a grief story. Then she also has, a little bit of a different aspect to our grief journeys. Grief comes in many different forms, many different ways. And I wanted to explore this with you all. So I think that a lot of you are going to be enlightened. I think you're going to get some hope out of this. And I'm so excited to share this with you. So, Karol, let's get started. You shared that you began praying for your readers the moment you wrote the first word of your first book. Why did prayer come before writing for you?
Both of my books came from a place of really of suffering and from the deepest places of my heart. I never wanted either of the books to be about me. Both of them are memoirs, and both of them are about our adoption and grief journeys that we have had, and our special needs journey. And I just wanted it to be a message of hope. And so with both of the books, before I began writing, I just asked the Lord to give me the words, and to put the books into the hands of the right people at the right place at the right time. And I don't want my readers to see me. I want them to see, in my second book, I want them to see the bravery of my son, who was profoundly disabled. And then also, I just want them to see Jesus, and I want him to see his grace, his mercy, his love, his compassion, and the hope that we have in him, even when we're in our deepest places of grief.
It was beautiful. That is awesome. Um, you once imagined your life unfolding very differently, yet God brought your mission directly into your arms. When did you realize the life you were living was not the one that you had planned, but the one you were being called into? Because God is amazing that way. You know, it's we always try to think that we have this plan and this is how this is going to work, and God is like, nope, nope. But you know, His ways are so much better than our ways. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so adoption was never really on our radar at all. And we were actually asked to host a child that was coming from Haiti, who had uh, a heart defect. And he was going to be coming to Haiti to have his open heart surgery and then return to his biological mother in Haiti. It wasn't long after we had him and his heart was repaired that I do have a medical background, and I began to realize that there was a lot more going on with this baby than what we had originally believed. And long story short, he was diagnosed with brain damage. He was deaf and blind. He never spoke. He had cerebral palsy and also a cognitive delay. So we had suddenly we were faced with he couldn't go back to Haiti. His biological mother didn't want him to come back to Haiti, and he just would not have survived in Haiti without the medical care that he needed. And so suddenly we were faced with this decision of, do we send this child back to Haiti, or do we adopt him? And we did adopt him, and I pretty much knew pretty much right away that we had taken on something really, really big that was going to change our life dramatically. Um, and it, I couldn't have imagined then how much our life was going to change because, at that point he was just a baby. And, um, but pretty much as soon as we made that decision, we were thrust into the world of disabilities and, doing everything in our power to help him meet his greatest potential. And we knew basically, um, it just kind of was like our life at that point. We just started to realize that our life was not our own.
Right.
Our life belongs to God.
Mm-hmm.
And if we wanted to be open to whatever he had. And pretty quickly we learned that together, my husband and I had kind of a gift for caring for kids with disabilities. And the Lord brought two more children with disabilities to us. Um,
Wow.
and we knew pretty much right away that the only way that we were going to be able to live out this calling was by his strength and his grace, because it just was way bigger than what we were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean that's amazing, and I can see that. Like I said, when God calls you to it, He gives you all the things that you need to get through it. But yeah, sometimes it's like
Yes.
something that you would never even fathom, for yourself. And then when you're in it, God gives you everything you need to do what you need to do. And I think that is absolutely beautiful. Um, you and your husband felt content with your family, yet adoption changed the trajectory of everything. How did you grieve the life you thought you were building while saying yes to the life placed before you?
So it was kind of interesting. So when we first got his diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
I grieved because we had this baby in our house for 4 or 5 months, and we loved him. And so suddenly we were given this diagnosis that the odds of him surviving in Haiti were slim to none. And at that point, we thought he was going to have to go back to Haiti. And so I grieved hard for that because it felt like a death sentence for him. And so
Yeah.
I grieved hard for that. And then we made the decision to adopt. And once we first made that decision, it felt kind of like a relief to me
Mhm.
because, I mean, it essentially felt like saving his life. But then
Yes.
when we started going into it, and I started realizing just how profound his disabilities were, then, and as he grew, the gap between him and a normal, typical developing child started widening. And he started missing all of those milestones,
Mhm.
sitting up, crawling, walking. And then I started grieving that his life was going to be hard.
Mhm.
It didn't look like the life that I would want for any of my children.
Mhm.
And I also started to grieve that my life was not going to look, and my biological children's life was not going to look. It was going to be hard. There was just no way around it. And so I really grieved just the loss of the life that we thought we were going to have.
Mhm. It makes perfect sense. Um, so many people associate grief only with death, but your life reflects ongoing and layered grief. How do you understand grief now after living it this way? And we're going to get into your other grief story, but I wanted to ask this question because so many people, I'm going through my own grief journey, the loss of my brother, but in my life there have been things that I didn't realize I was in a place of grief. Um, it could be loss of relationships, and like you said, loss of expectations for your children and the expectation for yourself, your life. So I just want to just get you to touch on that.
Um, yeah, I think grief comes from any form of loss. And loss is a part of life. And yeah, we have had a lot of loss, but like for us, we grieved the loss of the milestones that all three of our biological children or our adopted children were unable to, they were never going to meet. And
Hmm.
yes, we did adopt them. And so it wasn't like I had, these plans for these children before they were even born. But
Right.
it's still, you grieve the loss of every one of those milestones. And you grieve, there are so many different losses in raising a child with disabilities, and you grieve all of those losses. And
Hmm.
so I just think um, that as parents of children with disabilities, we need to extend grace to ourselves and realize that we
Hmm.
are going to grieve these things,
Hmm.
um, because there are a lot of losses.
Yeah.
And like the loss comes in so many different forms. It comes in, divorce, in loss of a job, loss of, um, even as older people, the loss of their independence.
Yeah.
And so there's just so many things that we can grieve the loss of. And I just think that I think it's important that we recognize this as grief.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. I agree. I agree. This is a good segue to this question because um, what is the kind of grief parents of children with severe intellectual and developmental disabilities carry that often goes unseen and unacknowledged? And then we talked about not meeting milestones, but I want you to talk a little bit about, you know, being okay with understanding that that grief for you is okay. There's a lot of guilt with saying, how dare I, what I mean? And so I want you to kind of touch on that because that's a huge part too. Yeah.
Yes. Guilt is a very, very big piece of parenting children with disabilities, um,
Mhm.
because they're our children
Mhm.
and we love them. But oftentimes we wish that things were different.
Sure.
We don't want to see our children's lives be hard. And so that this is this question that you're asking here is an excellent question because um, when you have a child, so think of yourself as a newborn baby.
Mhm.
You like a mother's love for that infant, that newborn infant is so fierce.
Mhm.
And then as your child gets older, the ferocity of that love changes because they become more independent.
Right.
And so your love, and I can say this because I have four adult, normal functioning adult children. And so your love kind of shifts. It doesn't get any less, but it gets different.
Right.
But when you have a child that is dependent on you for their most basic needs for their entire life,
Mhm.
the ferocity of love, that love is love. Like I can't even, I can't even describe it. I'm not saying that I love my disabled children more than I love my normal, typical developing children. It's just a
Right.
different kind of love.
Right.
Um, and we would lay down our lives for them. And
Yes.
yet sometimes we look around at other people living normal lives and we grieve that we don't have that. And
Mhm.
there is a tremendous amount of grief that comes with that. Um, Sometimes we feel shame because we wish that things were different. Um, and we do wish that our children didn't face so many struggles. We wish that we didn't face so many struggles. And so I just think that, when we wish, it feels selfish to say that we wish that our life was different. And it kind of like goes hand in hand because to say that we want their life to be different is the same thing as saying that I want my, they cannot be separated. Does that make sense?
Agree. Yes, it does.
Uh, and so you grieve that. So here is an example. So my son Moise, at the end of his life, he just had a lot going on medically, and emotionally, he struggled a lot with frustration and anger. And sometimes I would look at him when he would be so frustrated and angry, and it just seemed almost like he was tormented.
Mm.
And one of the areas where I experienced incredible grief or incredible guilt
Mhm.
is that I longed for him to be free,
Mhm. Mhm.
free of his broken body, free of just whatever it is that went on in his mind that I didn't have answers to.
Right.
And I felt guilt because to say that I wanted to see him be free of his body was to also say that my life would be easier because there's no question that my life would be easier without him. And so
Mhm.
there is just an incredible amount of guilt for wishing things were different. And I, it's just, it's very hard to describe. I hope I don't feel like I'm doing justice in explaining it, but I'm hoping I can get that across that there's just guilt in wishing that it feels selfish to wish that things were different. Even though we really want it different for them, we also want it different for ourselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I also would it hope that we would extend grace as mothers. It is one of the hardest thing to see your children suffer.
Yes.
And what human nature says, it's guilt to say, that I would rather see my child leave than, be but there is an unconditional love that we have as moms that is heart-wrenching to say that I could let you go if it meant that you could be in your healed body.
Yes.
And I think that we as moms, we really, and some dads too, but I mean, we as moms particularly, we hold everything. And
Yeah,
being in your situation, the most unselfish ways that you've cared for these children and loved on them, even the fact that you decided to write this book to honor your son in a way that, that gives his struggle, his life, a beautiful story that is not just about his illness. I think that I hope that you, because you are a woman of faith, that you've given yourself some grace, because that's a mother's
I
love
do.
too. Yeah.
Well, I do. And I did find relief from the guilt and the shame. There were two things that I did. Um, Number one, I found a godly Christian counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was life changing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to voice these things about our children.
I
We
know.
don't
Yeah.
want to voice these hard things. And parents of children with disability face a lot of judgment and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it should not be that way, but it is a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And for, the way that you discipline them, and there's a lot of, like that's this the way that you're treating this child is not fair to your other children, and there's just a lot of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
um, Sometimes that might just be perceived, but sometimes it's also very real.
Right.
So finding a good counselor, a very godly counselor that took me back to the word, was
Mm-hmm.
kind of life changing for me, because he I could go and I could express these things knowing it was not going to go outside of that room,
Right.
and knowing that I was not going to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to say these things and not just, you know, hold them into ourselves. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was, and then just talking about the stress, he gave me tools and ways to manage the stress that went along with parenting very complex children.
Yeah.
So that was huge. And the other thing that is important to know is that with complex children, there's a lot of trauma involved. I had countless situations where I had to save my children's lives. I had to save my son's life.
Yeah.
And, rushing to the hospital and calling 911. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very traumatic scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so navigating all of the trauma is a really, really big piece too. And then the other way, which this is something that the counselor that I saw, he kind of taught this to me,
Right.
was I began prayer journaling
Mm-hmm.
and writing out my prayers, which back when I first started doing this wasn't the term that was used, but it was ultimately lamenting. I
Mm-hmm.
learned to come before the Lord and write out my prayers in lament. And lament is a really, really big and very important piece of grief and loss. So it's very biblical. Lament is very biblical. We read about Elijah. He poured out his lament in the cave of Mount Horeb.
Yeah.
He was lonely and scared, which is very much how special needs parents often feel. It's very isolating, very
Yeah.
lonely, and very scary.
Yes.
And then we have Job. He cried out in his suffering. We
Yes, he
have
did.
David, who pours out his anguish in the Psalms. We
Mm-hmm.
have Jeremiah. The entire book of Lamentation is basically Jeremiah's plea for mercy.
Yes.
And then in Second Chronicles, we have King Jehoshaphat. He's lamenting. He says in somewhere, I can't tell you exactly where it's at, but it's in Second Chronicles. He says, "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you."
Mm-hmm.
And lament is an honest, deep conversation with God about
Mm-hmm.
our pain, our confusion, our fear, and our doubt. and we can
Yeah.
just pour that out to God. And then in lament, we ask those difficult questions that don't really have an answer, but it's okay to ask them of God. And just say, God, I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I mean, think Jesus. Jesus said, how long, have you what exactly does, oh Lord, why have you forsaken me?
Yes.
And so it's so important to allow ourselves that lament. And then what I have found is that when we lament, like when I would go and I'd take my prayer journal and I would start writing, this is a daily practice for me, pretty much inevitably, our lament turns to praise.
Mm.
And it takes our eyes and it gets us off of ourselves and gets it back on Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I love that. I had started journaling, but lamenting, I never thought of it that way. Is some of the things that, when you're in a grief journey that you feel like, I'm not going to say that to God because, like I don't question God. But, in lamenting, you're right. You can say, well, God, I'm really feeling today I feel kind of angry, or today I
Yes,
feel kind of,
absolutely.
and all of that is okay. So I love that you said that. And I hope ladies or gentlemen, if you're listening, that if you're going through a grief journey, let's put this in practice because
Mhm.
I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to look at it a different way. I'm going to look at it in that way. There are a lot of things
Yeah,
that are in here that
yeah,
I keep because I think as a Christian, I shouldn't put that in prayer, but really you
yeah.
should. You should.
You should. And I mean, like all of these people that, Jehoshaphat and David, they said these things to God, and that
Mhm.
it is given to us as a model.
Mhm.
And these were I mean, David was a man after God's own heart.
Yes,
And
he
so
was.
this is what it's there for us to
Mhm.
learn from that.
Yeah,
And I have found that God can handle pretty much anything we throw at him.
absolutely.
I've never found anything that God can't handle.
You are right. You're
Yeah.
100% right. Yes,
He's got
yes.
some pretty big shoulders.
Oh, yes, yes. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, the one thing that we haven't done, and I want you to, if you're comfortable, sharing the devil loss. We talked about the devastating loss of, Moise. Well, we didn't really get into the actual loss piece, but what you went through with him, and we're going to get into that. But I want you to talk about the fact that, that you have had some devastating losses of children. And if you're comfortable, can you share, your grief journey with actual loss of life of children and what that season taught you about love, grief, and survival?
Yes. So I have lost two children. Um, my daughter, Jelaine, was 2.5 years old. Um, hold on one second here. My daughter, Jelaine, was 2.5 years old when she died tragically in an accident at our home. Sorry, I have to plug in my, I'm losing some
No, that's
power
fine.
here. Um, she was 2.5 years old when she passed away in an accident. It was horrifically tragic, and um, it was just, it was awful. And at
Hmm.
that time, I had four teenage children that I needed to navigate through grief and loss and trauma.
Hmm.
And then in 2024, so Jelaine passed away in 2018. And in 2024, Moise, my oldest adopted son, he developed aspiration pneumonia, and it was very sudden and unexpected. And he died 3 days after he developed pneumonia.
Mm. Mm.
And The two deaths were dramatically different.
Mhm.
Jelane's passing was very, very traumatic. Moise's passing, it was traumatic. I don't, here's one thing that I have come to understand in losing two children, and death is, I think that death is always traumatic. I want to use the word ugly, because what I've come to understand is death is Satan's last chance to, drag somebody down. And
Mm.
for those who love the Lord, or in my children's sake case, they were eternal children and they were
Yes.
guaranteed a place in heaven. And
Yep.
so
Love that.
death is always ugly, but for children, those with intellectual disabilities, and those who love the Lord, it does not win. Satan does
No,
not win.
he does not.
And you know, it just, the two kinds of death for us were so polar opposite.
Mhm.
But I really have to say, I kind of always thought that, because Moise struggled so much, and I did pray that he would one day be free of his broken body.
Mhm.
Um, it did not lessen the grief at all.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely not. So I kind of, what I tend to say is Jelaine, she had Down syndrome, and she was just this joyful, happy little being.
Mm.
And she did have health issues. She had open heart surgery, but for the most part, she did not know any suffering in her life. And
Mhm.
so for us to have her, it was just devastating.
Really
But then with
devastating. Yeah.
Maurice, our grief was equally devastating, but it was different because he had suffered pretty much his whole life. And so when
Mhm.
we came to the end of his life, we look back at his whole life and kind of grieved his whole life of all the
Mm.
suffering of his whole life.
Mhm.
Um, but surviving child loss, I mean, child loss is survival.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's all there is to it.
1000%. Mhm. I agree with you.
It's survival. To lose a child, yeah. And so one of the things, my sister actually just lost her son,
I'm
just
sorry
this
to hear
past
that.
August,
Mm. Sorry to hear that.
and it was devastating. And the night after he passed, she looked at me and said, "I don't know what to do now." And one of the things that I have learned is that grief takes a long time. And when we lose a child, we only need to do whatever comes next.
Mhm.
It means whatever the Lord, He gives us, He does not give us grace for each day, He gives us grace for each moment.
Yeah.
And so it starts out by getting out of bed, because there's a strong, when you lose a child, there is a strong desire to not even get up again. And so it starts with getting out of bed, putting on clothes, putting food in your body, and living moment by moment in the grace that the Lord gives you for each moment.
Yes. I agree. I agree. Yeah.
And if somebody were to ask me, how do you survive it? First of all, there's not a choice. It's not a choice. You survive it by the grace of God,
Mhm.
one breath at a time.
Yes. I agree. Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Let's talk about your new book. It
Yep.
was born from deep love and deep grief. What did writing it allow you to say or hold that words had not yet made space for?
Um, I find a lot of healing. I learned this back when I started with a counselor. Um, I learned, hold on one second here. I learned that there is a great, for me, there is a great deal of healing through writing.
Hmm.
And so for me, this writing Moise's story has A, given me an opportunity to honor him,
Hmm.
and B, it has been a place for my healing because when you are parenting a child with disabilities, you, like I said, you experience a lot of trauma, you experience a lot of stress. And when you are in, it's just like one long stretch of survival mode. And so when you are trying to take care of that child, you don't have time to process all of that grief and suffering. You just don't have time to do it. You have to take care of your child.
Yep.
And so the grief after he passed was so, it's just like all that 23 years of hard stuff just kind of just like fell on me all at once. And so I was able to go back and write it all out and process each surgery, each of the really difficult things that we went through with him, and just write it out. And in doing so, I healed, but I also gained so much awe of what God did in his life
Mm.
through
That's beautiful.
one boy who never took an independent step, who never spoke a single word in his life.
Mm. That
He
is beautiful.
suffered more than the average person does in 80 years. He suffered more in 23 years. He
Wow.
experienced more than 35 surgeries, major surgeries, and just writing the story was so healing and such a beautiful experience for me. Um, I'm scared. It's just it hasn't actually been released. It's in the pre-order stage now, and so it's published and it's available for pre-order, but it's not going to actually be released until February 25th. And I'm scared. I'm a little bit scared for people to read because I think there are going to be things that a lot of people didn't know. Um, but I want it to honor him, and I believe that it does.
I believe that it will. I believe that it will. I know what your intention was behind it, and I believe you will be blessed in knowing that he now has this legacy, and that his life will bless others in a way that you don't even understand at this point. You know what I mean? You are obedient.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. I did now want to ask you, when a grieving parent or caregiver picks up your book, what do you hope they feel, in their heart as they read?
So for people who are caregivers, so through I'm it's Moise's story,
Right.
but throughout his story, I have threaded um, kind of the process of getting them, like it starts when you have a child with complex medical needs or disabilities, helping them reach their greatest potential. It kind of starts at birth. A lot of parents are in a little bit of a denial, um,
Hmm.
and I hope that this helps parents see that it's really important to maybe accept that my child has a disability and get them
Hmm.
the help that they need, that they need. And so throughout the book, I tell, okay, at this age, this is what you need to start doing. At this age, this is what you need to start doing as far as like accessing some of the services that are out there. Obviously, it's different with every child. I mean, every typical child is dramatically different from another, and then when you add
Right.
disabilities into it, it's even greater. So throughout the book, there is, all the steps that need to be taken. There are a lot of resources in there. And so for caregivers, I hope that it is a help. And I hope that some of what I write in there, some of what my husband and I have experienced is validating to other caregivers to say, yeah, this is really hard. And it's okay to say that.
Hmm.
Um, and I hope one of the things that I talk about in the book is um, keeping an eternal perspective for our children. I refer to children who have disabilities who are cognitively impaired as eternal children because that is essentially what they are. And
Yeah.
so, but we also need to see them and ourselves as eternal beings because we're
Yes.
all in seasons of life and there is no season that lasts forever.
That's true.
Nothing.
That's true.
Moise had 23 years of suffering, but it was not forever. There is
Hmm.
always hope for those of us who know Christ. There is always hope because of Jesus Christ. And
Hmm.
so that's one of the main things that I want people to understand. And I want people to see just the impact that people with disabilities can have on society, on the world, and especially on their parents and their family.
Hmm. Hmm. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So right now, if a woman listening is carrying heavy grief, whether from loss, caregiving, shattered expectations, what would you want her to know about herself?
I would want her to know that we come closest to the man of sorrows when we are suffering. And that is when we become the most acquainted with him. And when we are suffering, I believe it is a testimony of how much he loves us because he wants us to draw near to him.
Hmm.
He's pursuing us. And it's easy to ask the questions, why me, God? Why me? Why are you doing this to me? But I wonder if we can turn that question around and say, why me, Lord? Why have you entrusted me with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
have you given me this cross to carry for you?
Hmm. Hmm.
And the answer is because he loves us and he's going to change us radically through the suffering if
Yeah.
we allow it.
If
If
we
we
allow
allow
it.
it.
If we allow it. I concur. And I believe sometimes our biggest struggles, our biggest sorrows, our biggest, the hardest things we've come through shape us to walk in our purpose and then help others. And
Yes.
I truly believe that. And so when you're going through those hard things and they're kind of like shaping you up, God is you when you're young and you haven't been through a whole lot, and it's just like it's whatever. But my grandma used to say to me, "Baby, keep living," because I
Yeah.
used to be like, "Well,
That's
grandma."
right.
Like why
Yeah.
when we get in church are you just praising God and doing all this and crying out and when you pray you start crying and she just said, "Baby, keep living." And I look back and
Yep.
I thought, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yes. We just keep living and we keep loving. Just keep
Yeah,
loving.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. I have been so blessed by this interview. So I have one last question for you. But
Hmm.
ladies, I know that you two have been enlightened and blessed by this, and I'm so thankful, Carol, for this. Um, so I do want to know for those have felt that are feeling connected to your story and want to support your work, where can they find your new book? Um, and where can they connect with
So
you?
yeah. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook. And I am on, it's Karol Holmes author. My name is Carol with a K, so KarolHolmes author, Karol Holmes author. And then I do have a website. It's lovingtheleast.com.
Okay.
And then my books are both available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you get your books from. So
Awesome. 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 Okay, ladies, I encourage you to get the books. I know I am. And Carol, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being so transparent and being, just letting us in. It's a amazing journey you've been on. You've been through a lot, but I see God working through you, and I really, really appreciate you coming on our platform and blessing us with your story. So I always
thank
like to
you.
give my guests, yes, I always like to give my guests the final words. So before we close, is there anything else you want to say to our viewers?
Um, One of the things that I guess I feel like I need to say is that, this 45 minutes or whatever of an interview is just literally scratching the surface of just all the things that God has done in my life. Um, by It all happened from one phone call saying, "Would you care for this child for me?"
Mhm.
And we said yes. And at that point in my life, I don't think that I would have said that was an act of obedience. At that point, it kind of was just like, kind of, it just felt like a nice thing to do. But in saying that, the Lord completely and radically changed our life, and He changed us for the better. And so, one
Mm,
of the things that I really want to leave people with is when the Lord brings something really big and puts it in front of you and says, you know, this is the way, walk in it, don't be afraid, because He's got something really big for you if we act in obedience. And His grace is sufficient for each
yes.
moment. And when we are in the trenches is when we really, really come to just really see His face and really feel the love of His arms around us.
Mm, awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Carol. I do want to say, ladies, I'm going to pin in the comments her information on how you can find her on Instagram, her website, and to list the books and make sure Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you find books, so that you can support her. And thank you again, Carol, so much. This has been amazing. Ladies, if this resonates with you,
Thank you.
please share this with a friend. Please comment, let us know about your own journey and what you have gained from this interview. And again, thank you so much, Carol. I really wish you all the success
Thank
on
you.
the book. Yes, yes, absolutely. So,
Thank you.
ladies, absolutely. Yes. And so at this point, we're going to say goodnight. We hope you have been thoroughly blessed. I know I have been. Make sure that you check the pinned comments and get all the information. And we hope you go out and have a blessed evening.